Welcome to Let's Talk Para, the podcast where we talk about all things para sport. I'm Yasmina Isa, a para badminton player, and I'm thrilled to bring you inspiring stories from athletes, coaches, researchers, and everyone shaping the para sport movement. If you're passionate about para sport or just hearing about it now, join me each episode as we delve into the world of para sport. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Para, where we talk about all things para sport. Joining me today and bringing in a lot of experience in coaching is Joe McDonnell. Joe is the head of para athletics at Loughborough University. He has coached numerous Paralympic medalists and world champion, and just recently in Paris he had two athletes competing. Joe, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolute pleasure. Love to be here.
So Paris, obviously, was 2 months ago now?
Yeah, feels like a long time ago, but yeah, it was 2 months ago.
And obviously the lead up to Paris was quite different because it was 3 years rather than 4 years.
Yeah, we had Tokyo in 2021, which kind of was the back end of all the COVID stuff. And they made it a 3-year cycle rather than a 4-year cycle, which is... I'm a firm believer that I think in a cycle, an athlete is good for 3 years. And what you try and do in that, when you have your 4-year cycle, is kind of nearly give an athlete within that nearly a year to repair.
Yeah.
And so maybe you would do a games, and then the year after the games, you might, even though you'd compete the next season, you'd have objectives in that season around, maybe getting stronger or some part of development for that athlete for that next year, and then you'd build into the next game. So yeah, it was a bit weird because it was a 3-year cycle.
Yeah, and so you had two athletes in Paris this year. So you had Thomas Young.
I had Tom Young, yeah.
And Didi Olker.
Didi Olker, yeah. Tom Young, TY as we call him.
Yeah.
Wonderful human being. Just a genuinely nice, lovely family. Just there's nothing that you wouldn't want to go right for that man. And he had the year of his life this year, and just unfortunately at the games, the one race that he needed to just have an average day, he had some significant issues in warm up around calf cramping, which just completely destroyed his race, and he kind of missed out on a bronze medal by 0.1 of a second. He had an amazing holding camp. His holding camp, he hit PBs, so we do some testing through gates, what we call a flying 30 meters, and it gives you a really good idea on the max speed that an athlete can run through that 30 meters, which gives you an indication of how well the athlete is doing with the training plan. The athlete is one of the key measures that I use. And in the holding camp, he smashed his PB in that. He had a block session against a couple of really quick athletes, and he smashed that. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better camp going into a major games, because Tom Young and that was everything. He was focused, he was quick, he was strong, he was healthy. And then went into the village 3 days before his event, and I didn't have what they call an accreditation to go into the village, and rightly so, because I wasn't part of the team. But I also didn't have what they call P accreditation, which is like an accreditation to get into the warm-up area.
Yeah.
And I know Tom has kind of done an interview kind of around this about how it affected him and his reflection on it. And knowing Tom the way I know him, and because we've got such a close relationship, I think that was a real deciding factor in how Tom felt in that run-up. And it was a straight final as well, which is really unusual.
So he just raced once, and that was the one opportunity you had to do anything.
And because of that, he didn't have that because quite often athletes like that at least one race, and it kind of gets rid of that nervous energy. And he didn't have an opportunity to do that. And look, that's the way, because of the amount of athletes that were in his event, because there was only enough athletes for one race. So if there had been one more athlete, they would have done a heat in the final. But there wasn't.
So there was just enough for that one race. Yeah.
Which is really unusual for that class, because I've seen it over the years where it nearly looks like they're going to have to go heat, semi-finals, finals. And this is the very first time that I've seen the men's T38, which is one of the quick classes, going in and not having at least a heat before the final. So it was pretty strange.
Was it because the IPC had set quotas and they had to abide by those quotas, so that therefore the number of players qualified was less than that?
It could be. Because then people, and so if you look at the Great Britain team, for athletics, they had a quota of 17 men and 22 women on the split. Now, you pick your 17 people that you think are going to do best at your games for you, and you've got 22 women that you can pick. Now, if you don't use all the female slots, you can't say, well, we didn't use all the female slots, so here's 4 female slots back and we have 4 men. It doesn't work like that. So it is a good point, and I know lots of people have said it's because of the way the quotas were set. People went, and rightly so, for the events that they thought he had the best chance of winning a medal in. So
then you got point. Like the people who could get 6th, 7th, and 8th. Those kind of people didn't end up coming, and then that led to a really small number being in, rather than having heats, which is actually, I think, quite beneficial. Yeah,
and you had to win slots. So Tom Young in 2022. Which again feels like an awful long time ago, should have raced at the Commonwealth Games. And in 2022, the reason that Tom didn't race at the Commonwealth Games was because he had a significant injury. Now, Tom, I'm going to use the term, broke his knee in 2022. And that was another year where he was doing really, really well. So he didn't race that year. Now, it took a long time for him to get over that injury, but we got him back running. In 2023, there was the World Championships, Para-World Championships in Paris. Now, Tom finished 7th in that race because he wasn't
fit,
He wasn't fit as he should be to run in that race.
Yeah.
So he didn't get an automatic, or he didn't win an automatic slot. So Tom then went to Kobe, the beginning of 2024, came second to the person that won gold in Paris. So we knew that Tom was getting back to that kind of fitness level and competition level that he needed. Now, I wasn't with him in Kobe either, but he had a heat and he had a final. So he got his nervous run out of the way. He ran an 11 dead. In Paris in the final, he ran an 11 dead. In the final in Kobe, he ran 10:96.
So Paris arguably could be seen as one of his worst, like in this season. It is one of his worst performances.
Yeah, because what I do is I work on, if I'm checking to see how an athlete is developing, or kind of, are they getting quick, or is the program working? I work on an average. So look, a PB is great, but a PB is an outlier. It's the quickest time you've ever ran, as is the slowest time you've ever ran in that season. The outliers, even though the PB is great because it shows that you're developing really well. So Tom's average times this year is the best average times he's ever had. And he ran 2 PBs this year as well. So he ran a PB and then backed it up again with another PB. So we knew he was in really, really, really good shape. But yeah, one time that you need 10.5 seconds to be your, or 10.8, 10.9 seconds to be your average 10.8, 10.9 seconds that you used to running, didn't happen. And we know the reason why. So sometimes an athlete will compete, and I like to think I know how the athlete roughly will run because of the testing that we've done. So I've got a good idea where they are, and that way you can have really open, objective sessions with your athlete around the expectation of today's race is X. So you're going to run, I expect you to run sub 11 seconds. You'll probably run around a 10.8, 10.9.5, 10.6, because you've done the testing, because you know what you can't control is the environment and the wind and the rain. So if there's wind or rain, whether it's a negative wind or a plus wind, it's neither here nor there, because there's ways that we can walk around what you would have ran had the wind not been there. But yeah, Tom was in the shape, absolutely in the shape of his life going into Paris.
So before the match, obviously, I think people underestimate the power of a coach. And because you didn't have the accreditation, do you think had you been able to go into that warm-up area, that would have made a difference for Thomas?
I think it would have made a difference to Tom being less anxious going into that. And if you're less anxious, would that have stopped Tom from getting cramp? There's a possibility that would happen. And because of the way me and Tom work together, and not just with Tom, with all my athletes, I liked it. My motto in my head with athletes is develop the person, then develop the athlete.
Yeah.
So I like to know the person. So, Tom or any of the other athletes to turn up the race, they're all good athletes. They're all trained professional athletes. It's that 1% that you can add into, and regardless of what sport you're in. So there's a famous quote from a rugby player called Paul O'Connell, and one of the things that he'd said on the Lions tour, I love rugby by the way, he said on the Lions tour, he was talking to players about do things that take no talent. Takes no talent to be on time, takes no talent to back your mate up, takes no talent to be respectful to people around you. So there's a lot of stuff that I think we underestimate that is nothing got to do with talent, but what it is, it's an attitude, it's a belief, it's a focus, and it takes no talent to ensure that any athlete is well supported just before they compete, regardless of what the sport is. And I just think for Tom, and not just Tom, I mean, if you look at the games in total for UKA, for GB athletics, they won 2 ambulance sprint medals at the games, which were both bronze. Now, for the years that I've been involved in parasport, that is by far the smallest number that we've seen, by far.
For GB?
So I'm talking about ambulance, so like sprints, and that was incredible to see that. Now, that doesn't mean that some of the talented athletes weren't there. They were, but it's just the smallest number that we've seen. Now, some of that is around. Para-athletics has moved on considerably. You look at the times that some of the athletes are running now. I'll get some of these numbers close to being right. So T47, where you've got somebody that's got an arm impairment around the elbow, just below the elbow, I think it's 10:28.
Yeah.
There's a Norwegian T12, T13 runner that's a 10:3, 10:4 runner. And all these events are just getting quicker. The athlete that won Tom's event ran a 10:6. The old world record was, I think it was 10:76.
Oh wow, that's. I mean, that is a big in athletics. That's obviously a very big.
2 days later, he went and ran the 400 and ran, I think it was 48.4. So the talent of some of these athletes coming through is incredible, and I still believe we're scratching the surface of the talent of para athletes, and this isn't just you. This is worldwide.
Yeah,
I think para athletics and para-sport, we're just starting to see the belief that some of the para-athletes coming through, I mean, are seriously talented. So forget about them being para-athletes. They are seriously talented athletes that will be out at some point, will be able to stand on a line against their non-disabled counterparts and race at a high level.
Yeah, I think parasport in general around the world, across all sports, the level has gone up massively, and I think that's largely due to the fact that countries are starting to see the value in paying attention to parasport. And it was never about lack of ability, it was more about no one got the same support that the non-disabled athletes did get, so you were never able to progress, and I think that's changing now.
I think you're absolutely right. I think what's happening now, and let's face it, if we put our cards on the table, sport is a business.
Yeah.
No, don't get me wrong. For the people that are taking part in the sport, the last thing they see it as a business. They see it as, a personal objective or a personal goal for what they're trying to achieve. Whether they want to be the next Thomas Young or the next Usain Bolt or the next Shelley Ann Fry, whoever it is, these young kids coming through see these inspirational people and want to be like them. And so I think the difference is now so there's a lot of para events where there are people out in the general public that have gotten permits that don't see anybody that looks like them that compete. And the key thing, I believe, with inspiring people to compete is some child being able to look and go, that's somebody that looks like me, that's competing or doing whatever. And that inspires them to go and do things. But while there's no visual representation of what a child believes that they're like, they have nobody to measure against. So we're starting to see the wheelchair racing, for instance. That's been in kind of on TV a bit, but well supported for years. And there's a classification T54 men and women. They're like, how I describe them is that the 100-meter racers of the non-disabled games, because they are so strong and so quick.
Yeah.
And, they go through marathons in 2.5 hours or something, or unbelievable, so that's out there and people see that. But we're starting to see, a long jumper, Marcus Rem, who's jumped further than any other person's ever jumped.
Yeah.
Now he's a
para and non-para.
Yeah, I believe so. I think he's jumped further than I'd have to double check it. Oh. If it's not further than, it's very close to the. We'll check that while we're here. We finish the podcast.
Yeah.
Because that'd be an interesting.
Yeah.
A fact. Now I know the 1500 meters at the Olympics in Rio was a very tactical race, but the 1500 meters for the visually impaired athletes in Rio, the first 3 people past the post ran quicker than the winner of the Olympics.
And yeah, that's great. I don't think anyone would have ever thought, no one would have ever thought that. Yeah.
Now, regardless that people would go, oh yeah, but it was a slow 1500 meters, it was the Olympics. I don't care. We're talking about the talent of these individuals that have the ability just to do that. We've got, there's a bladed athlete, Ntando Malangu, who can run just over a 1:43 800 meters. Now,
see, you're saying numbers, but
I
don't know these.
So that would win books.
Oh, okay.
I think it would win the British champs. Again,
as in non-disabled.
Non-disabled.
It's always seen as the inferior, but now it's starting to show that para athletes can actually compete with the, non-disabled.
They can. Yeah. Now, admittedly, there's adaptations in that.
Yeah.
So if you're taking Ntando as a person, he's a double above knee amputee.
Yeah.
And, people will say, oh, yeah, and this person has got an advantage because he's got blades. He's also got no knees and no ankles. So his hips are his knees and his ankles. So for all the advantage he gets from having a blade, he's got the disadvantage of having no knees and no ankles.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting to see where we had at a major games, kind of mixed. So they have a they have a universal relay at the Paralympics, right?
Yeah.
And leg 1 is a visually impaired person. Leg 2 is an amputee, either leg or arm impairment. Leg 3 is a T35, T36, T37, T38 athlete. And leg 4 is a wheelchair racer. How cool would it be if you did a relay where you could mix disabled and non-disabled people?
Yeah, I think even because in the Olympics, you obviously get, I know in the Paralympics you're starting to get big crowds now, but if you do that in the Olympics, I think that's where you could really shed light on para
It'd
sport.
be an absolute showstopper, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if you think about let's take the Commonwealth Games where they wove in para events into the main timetable. Imagine one of those events be, we've got a relay, but we're also going to have, a disabled and non-disabled relay, and we're going to have mixed classes going in of disabled and non-disabled people. I'd have to sit down and figure out, whether it would be, 2 non-disabled people and 2 disabled people and what those classes would be. But that would be really interesting, right?
Yeah.
To watch that. It'd be absolute class.
Yeah, and I think the bigger thing is it raises awareness for para sport. People become more aware, because I think with a lot of people that the perception is still it's amateur, it's not professional. But when you see that integrated and they could actually compete, that changes the whole perception of para sport.
Yeah. I mean, at what point? So if I'm looking at the Olympics and I'm looking at the men's or women's 100, am I looking at the individual or am I looking at the race? Right? What I do is I look at the race, and then the individuals in the race, you kind of go, whoever it is kind of has won a medal or whatever it is. And as a coach, I might look at the running style of how they started or whatever. And I think a lot of people if I look at like para 100 races, they look at the impairment before they look at the race. So they'll say, oh, well, some of those people in that event look more impaired than others. It's not fair. Actually, classification, I try and liken it like a weight in boxing. So a weight in boxing, you've probably got 7 pound where
leeway.
Leeway, yeah. So you can be on weight. So let's say the weight was 11 stone. You can be on weight, or you can be 10 stone 7. Now you're still going to fight the person that's 11 stone.
Yeah.
But you've got, and para classification's a bit like that, where you'll never get 2 people with exactly the same impairment, with the exact same movement patterns, because otherwise you'd have 1 person in every race. So there has to be a window where people fit into. And so what people then need to look at is the athletes and the talent of the athletes, because that's what it comes down to. And I think we're getting to a point where with some of the events, people aren't looking at the impairment. They're looking at the spectacle, which is the race, which is the talented people in the race, or the people that are jumping, or the people that are throwing.
Yeah, which is what people should start looking at, because that's what they look at with like the Olympics, and that's what they should do with the Paralympics. So we've touched a bit on Paris and the Paralympics, but obviously within your position as a coach, you've had 18 years of experience now within para sport.
If I said 18 years, I lied. I think it's probably a lot more than that.
I searched it up, but that could be an outdated thing.
Okay. No. I suppose that could be, I've kind of always had athletes with impairment in my group, but even to this day, I don't consider myself a para coach. I consider myself, I'm a coach. I coach athletes.
Touching on that then, how did you start coaching disabled athletes then?
I never went out purposely to say, oh, I'm going to coach disabled athletes. That was never a plan. My daughter joined Charmwood. She used to turn up on a Monday and a Wednesday, and then the coach that was there used to turn up one day, not turn up another day, and me and another chap called Dave Walsh, and there was another chap called John. I think there was 9 kids in there, and I had 3 daughters. Dave's 2 daughters were coming down, and John had daughters coming down. So 6 of the athletes were our kids.
Yeah.
And we just kind of went one day, this is ridiculous. So Dave went and took what used to be called a level 1. Dave took a level 1, John took a level 1, I took a level 1. So we picked up the group. So that was kind of how I started coaching. I coached because my daughter needed someone to be there when she was turning up twice a week to help. I am a kind of person that if I'm going to do something, I'll go away and research it, and I'll read books. Now, fortunately, I had done a diploma associated with Loughborough University around, it was called Sport and Leisure Management at the time. And athletics was part of that. So I kind of had a bit of an idea, but to be fair, I had 1% knowledge, and so I needed to go, and I do that today. I'll go away and look at stuff, different methods of training, etc. So we ended up with 85 kids. From 9, we ended up with 85, and to this day, that Monday, Wednesday group of the kids that are under 11 years old, it was so sustainable that it's still got people on a waiting list waiting to come and join. And we started that in, it must have been probably 2001.
Yeah.
And it's just kept on. And then what had happened is someone had come along, and now don't ask me why, someone had come along with an athlete. I think the first athlete I had was a deaf athlete, and then I had a visually impaired athlete. But he just used to say, "Oh, go and see Joe." Now, again, that wasn't because I had any experience. It was just because I think they were fairly confident that
you take them on.
To this day, I've got a very open group. My group is very integrated. So it was never, in my head, it was never a thought process for me to go, right, I'm going to go and coach para-athletics. That's what I'm going to go and do. Because I think sometimes that can be a bit dangerous.
Yeah. Because
it's like saying to a child that's 11 years old, you're going to be a sprinter. So you need to give up all your other sport and you're just going to sprint. 11 years old, I want them to sprint. I want them to do cross country. I want them to do gymnastics.
Yeah.
I want them to go and play football or rugby, wherever it is. Preferably rugby, not football. But I just want them to go and do other sports.
Yeah.
Go and play badminton. Go and learn stuff that makes you use your body in different ways. Because if you're just running in a straight line, it's not good for you. Although athletics is the basis of all sport, but you still want them to have movement patterns. Yeah. And it kind of happened like that. And I, like I said, I had this visually impaired athlete, and my daughter guided that visually impaired athlete for a while. Then after that visually impaired athlete, I met this chap called Sam Ruddock, who's a student here at the university, who played American football at the university. He was doing some, I think they might call them 30-yard or 40-yard sprints.
Yeah. And
I just knew that as movement patterns didn't look the same as others.
Yeah.
And I was literally sitting on a bench, and he came over and I was having a chat, and I went on with sprints coach at Charmwood. If you ever need any help with any of your sprints, and this was in November 2011.
Okay.
And I said, if you ever need help with any of your sprints, I'm a sprints coach at Charmwood, give us a shout. I'm quite happy to come over and help you. And Sam did, you went, that'd be great. And in 2012, he competed at 2012 Paralympics.
Did he have any idea that he was eligible to compete at the time before 2011?
I don't think he did. He's one of the typical kids all those years ago that a doctor turned around and go, yeah, but he'll never ride a bike. Yeah, he's too impaired to never ride. And Sam, I think 3 years ago, won a gold at the Cycling World Championships. So he was told as a kid he was never going to ride a bike, right? Then he goes and wins a medal at World Championships in the velodrome.
Wait, son, this isn't para. This is
para.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So he did athletics and para, and paracycling.
Yeah, and look, that's one of the great things about para sport is you can diversify. I mean, there are not many, but there are a few athletes that dual sport. you know, they will cycle and run, or, you know, whatever it is, you know, they'll dual sport. And that's quite unique. And I think with parasport, there's a little bit of, just because I want to sprint, does that mean it's the sport that suits me? So with athletes that come along, you just try people at lots of different sports and lots of different events. And hopefully what happens is, and it might not be the initial event or sport they intended on going into, but they then suddenly find a sport or an event that they never thought that might suit them, but actually it's the one that they're really good at.
Yeah.
And it puts them on a pathway or a sport that, let's face it, the more that we can increase participation, the better the athletes are going to be. Because there's a massive focus in parasport, I believe, around talent spotting. And talent spotting is generally for elite. And they do talent spotting in all sports, whether it's disabled or non-disabled. But talent spotting in parasport, you're kind of looking for the next person that might win you a medal at the next Paralympic Games.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of effort, and so there's less effort in participation. And it's the participation end that we need to be putting more effort in, because if you get much better participation and greater participation, the likelihood is those really talented young athletes will then kind of surface to the top of that participation, and you'll end up then with a succession of really good athletes coming through.
Yeah. And
I guarantee you, in sports at this university, at lots of other universities, there are athletes, and I say athletes, so these are people that are currently doing sport around this country that, to your point, don't even know they have an event at Paralympic Games. They won't have a clue. They'll have never at all, oh, I could go and be a para-athlete and compete at Paralympics. Or just, again, if you think about the participation, I can go and participate at parasport against people on a level playing field that have a similar impairment to me.
Yeah. I think a lot of it as well, like, it's either to do with, you're told from a young age, if you are disabled and it's quite minor, to kind of avoid it, ignore it. And I think a lot of kids, so with other guests I've had on the show, they kind of they were ashamed of that disability, so they'd never want to look into what they could actually do with it. And I think that plays a big role until someone opens up an opportunity for them and tells them, no, this is actually your gateway to, you know, the world stage where you could actually be competing with people who have a similar impairment to you. But you're exactly right about that.
That's a really interesting comment, isn't it? Around, and I think you're absolutely right. I think there is still a bit of a stigma around, you know, a parent or whatever saying, "Oh yeah, my child has got cerebral palsy.
Yeah.
It's very, very mild, but my child's got." They do. You're right, and there's something around. So if I think I mentioned Sam Ruddock, right? Sam Ruddock's kind of mum used to say to him, "Stop complaining, just get on with it." So she made him do sport in spite of the advice she was given from kind of a doctor or whatever, saying he'll never do this and he'll never. That was kind of, well, I'm just going to let him try and see. And she never hid the fact that Sam had an impairment. It was very obvious that Sam had an impairment. But I think you're right. I think the more the parents just go, actually, you know, having an impairment puts you in a minority. If I got my numbers right, I think about 15% of the population have got some form of impairment. Yeah. I think that's about right. So there's 65 million people in the UK. Is that right? Roughly? That's 6,500. That's coming up to 8,000 people with an impairment in the UK.
Yeah.
So there are people out there with impairments that probably don't know that they could go and pay. There's a young girl, I'm not going to mention her name because she's brand new, has come to see me from hockey, and I did a session with her yesterday morning, and she contacted me about a week after I got back from the games, and she introduced herself and said, "I've just seen Jonathan Broome Edwards on the television doing high jump, and he's got talipes," which is an impairment around your foot and your lower leg. And she said, she plays hockey. She plays hockey for Loughborough Town, I think.
Yeah.
She went, I never realised there was, I was eligible to compete in para sport. Now, she's going to have to go through classification.
Yeah.
And that's a minefield as well. But,
yeah,
I mean, it's 2024, and we all think that people are really aware of what's going on. And you've got a very educated young girl who's playing non-disabled sport that never knew that her disability was a disability where she could go and potentially compete as a para-athlete.
I think having those conversations from an early age, not just parents, but in school, everywhere, knowing what your opportunities are, I think that would be of great benefit to most people.
Absolutely.
And I think at Loughborough, I think we're quite lucky in the sense that we get a lot of athletes, a lot of it, not even performance, but just a lot of people who love sport, and you're bound to get another person like her who's in the same case.
Every year. So I've officially moved into this role in 2020, I think it was.
Yeah.
It was beginning
as
of
in
COVID.
Loughborough University coach.
Loughborough University coach. But I've coached at Loughborough University for years.
Yeah.
Each year that I've done this role, I have the athletes that part of my role is recruitment of athletes as well. Every year, I always get one person that turns up that I didn't know about, that I just didn't know was coming here. That's a para-athlete, and didn't realise that we had a programme. Right. So this year, it's this young hockey player that's turned up. Last year, it was an athlete that didn't even tell me they were coming, and then sent me a message saying, oh, I know you coach here at Loughborough University, can I come and join your group? So even though I think from a recruitment point of view, and I'm pretty much of a chatter, right, I go along and I chat to people saying that how great our programme is. The message still kind of doesn't get out to everybody. And I'm happy to say that here at Loughborough University, we're the best. So forget about recruitment. We've got the best programme for para-athletes. Para-athletes come to Loughborough University, and I would like to think they have an amazing experience, because we go to books and we smash it out of the park. Got really good athletes that go and do it. We've got the training facility. If they're eligible for the scholarship, they get a scholarship. We've got a bursary where they can get some money.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is fantastic, and that is with complete integration. So they're not turning up in a para group, they turn up and they're training with their non-disabled counterpart elite athletes as well.
And they're joining the community as well.
And they're joining the community.
They're not feeling like they're
There's no exclusion.
Yeah. And I think that's something you were, like, from the very get-go, you were quite keen on doing, because I remember speaking to you in the past, you always said, when I view the athlete, I don't view them as para or non-para, I view them as a person. And I think something that stuck with me was when you said in a conversation, like not from the podcast, but you said even non-disabled athletes need adaptations. And for me, that was, I took a second to be like, yeah, because it's not just para athletes who need adaptations. Anyone could need adaptations. And that kind of goes into your coaching philosophy. So could you tell us a bit about what kind of approach you take when you're coaching your athletes, whether that be non-disabled or disabled?
So my belief is I develop the individual. So I spend a lot of time getting to know the person.
Yeah.
So even though they'll come and join my group, or they'll come to train or whatever, I spend more time trying to understand the person initially. Even though I'm observing them, and I'll give them some cues and tips of whether it's running posture or whatever it is. But I spend more time trying to understand the person, because if I understand the person, and I don't understand everybody, because none of us do, but if I spend more time understanding the person, I'm more likely to develop the athlete to the maximum potential, because that's my job. My job is to develop someone into the best that they can be. Now, if the best that they can be means that they get onto a team, or they go to a games, or they go to books, they get selected for books. Because we're not all super talented that are going to go and be elite.
Yeah. Not everyone's going to the Olympics or Paralympic Games.
Yeah, absolutely. So there has to be a realisation around that. But there also has to be a realisation that everybody has got an ability. And it's my job to maximise that ability if it's something that they want to go and do. So I spend more time developing the person than I do the athlete. So the person first, then the athlete. But then everybody that comes up as well, that comes into the group, they are athletes. Now, they all, non-disabled or disabled, they've all got their own little bit of individuality about how they move or how they do things. Now, part of my job as a coach is, so this is a nice example. So athletes with cerebral palsy will have poor movement that's caused by the cerebral palsy. Athletes with cerebral palsy will have more poor movement learned by what they've learned to move like because their body is adapted it. Now, my job is to get rid of the poor learned movement because I can't cure cerebral palsy. I can make them stronger, I can make them quicker, I can do all of that, but I can't get rid of cerebral palsy. My job, if I can get rid of a lot of that poor learned movement, I've then got someone that can then move better than they have before, run quicker than they did before, jump further than they did before. When a person comes up that's non-disabled and they come and I do what we call drills, and I do some drills with them, I'm looking at how much poor learned movement have they got. Because the balance probably isn't very good. So the first thing I work at is balance. The first thing I look at with an athlete with cerebral palsy or an impairment is balance. I'm looking for good posture. I'm looking for good movement. So what you're looking for as a coach is no different to whether you're coaching an athlete with an impairment or not. So they're just people. My job is, I call it just coaching. I look at the person in front of me and I deal with what I see in front of me, regardless of an impairment or not. And I've learned more as a coach from working with para-athletes than I have done working with non-disabled athletes. Because I think there's an assumption that if you've not got an impairment, there's certain things you can do. You know, whether it's, run, jump or throw, there's certain things you can do. That doesn't mean you do it well. There's just certain things you can do. So with an athlete with an impairment, what I do is I break the movement down into its finer parts. So I'll look at the very first thing that hits the floor when you're running is your foot, right foot in the right shape when you run. Guess what? If I've got a non-disabled athlete, the first thing I'll look at is the foot in the right shape when it hits the floor. So for me, and I genuinely mean that there's no difference when I coach and what I'm looking for. The only difference is the adaptions. So if I've got India Oates, who's a T35, she's got cerebral palsy, her ability to jump isn't as good as someone that's non-disabled. The adaptation for India is it's a smaller height. So the exercise is the same, it's just a smaller height.
Yeah.
So, but that adaptation, I've got an athlete that can jump 1.50 meter. I've got another athlete that's non-disabled that can't. So the adaptation for the athlete that can't jump 1.50 meter
is making
because it gives them a smaller box.
Yeah.
So there's no difference.
Now going on to the future of parasport, obviously you've been in it a while, you've seen the evolution of parasport. So where do you see parasport going into the future and where do you hope to see it going?
So where do I see it going? Where do I hope to see it going? I suppose and kind of middle answer to those is how long it's going to take that to happen. So I think LA is going to be huge. I think LA for parasport, I think the Americans are going to knock it out of the park. Generally do. Because I think that they're going to have, you can see it now, have a look at the results in France. Like I said before, the athlete that won Tom Young's event, 10-6. I'm going to suggest to you, there's a good chance that he's not the athlete that wins the T38 100 metre final
Another
in America.
American will be.
Another American will come along that's just better than he is. And I think that's the reality across all the events. You know, the Americans, so they've got, and I don't know what the chap's name is, but he is a single below knee amputee. And he was a 100-meter sprinter in Tokyo. And he won a medal. In France, he was a long jumper and he won a medal. So even the Americans within their own group are starting to look and going, I might have to change my event if I want to win a medal, because there's kids coming up at the back of me that are really, really good. I guarantee. So these new American athletes that are coming along are currently playing non-disabled sport. It's what we spoke about at the very beginning. There's a population of people playing non-disabled sport
who don't see the opportunity.
Who don't see the opportunity. And I think what we've got to do is really start looking at how do we get people to understand. Because it's okay doing recruitment saying, oh, if you've got a disability, come along to this day. We really need to be more. We need to be getting into clubs. And I don't know, not looking at people's medical records, but getting people to understand. And you made this point around kind of the stigma of someone having an impairment.
Yeah.
Get rid of the stigma and say there's a massive opportunity for you.
Own your disability, yeah.
Yeah, that's all it is.
Yeah.
We've all got a disability. Every single one of us that are walking around, we've all got something that we could say that's not what we'd expect a human being to move like or look like.
Yeah.
We've all got it. Every single one of us. It just... So there's a group of people that are in clubs playing sports now that don't know that there's an opportunity for them, that they could literally change their life. And we just need to find where these people are.
And then we could see parasport going to the next level.
Yeah, and like I said, I think I don't want to use the word normal because that's the wrong word to use, but I want a parallel of... So look, women's rugby.
Yeah.
Women's soccer. Right, I call it soccer.
I call it soccer as well.
You call it soccer,
yeah.
good. But 8 years ago, so I coached an athlete that got a gold medal when the women's rugby team won the Rugby World Cup. Yeah. I coached her when she was really young. Me and her dad, Phil Fleetwood, Vicky Fleetwood is her name. And she went to university at Leeds and started playing rugby up there. And they won that World Cup. And nobody really talks about it. Ask anybody about the team that won the 2003 World Cup when the England men won it. They all earned a living off the back of it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And you look at women's rugby now.
And it's gone a long way.
It's gone women's... I'm not really a soccer fan, football fan, right? But I kind of watch the big games on the TV. And I watch women's football. Because I'll call it football in case people didn't realise we call it soccer. And I watch... The women's game is flipping exciting. It's really good.
Yeah.
Right. I watch women's rugby. Now, men's rugby I still find really exciting because I like watching. But women's rugby, I mean, that is class. Something really, really good. And that's come on a long way. And we kind of have to have that evolution within part of sport.
Yeah.
And that evolution only comes along with investment, some sort of acceptance, I suppose, and maybe that's acceptance from the parents that have got children that have got an impairment, or the people with the impairment themselves, that feel like society, that they want to hide it from society because you don't really want people to know.
Yeah, even societal acceptance, just the awareness of it all. Once it's become normalized, more people will show up, more people, para sport in general, including para athletics, is just gonna
There's a GB athlete who his event got taken away, Richard Whitehead, who came from a marathon background, went into sprints. He goes around and does all these marathons and wins all these marathons, and he's a fantastic ambassador for parasport. He lives over at Nottingham. I mean, when I speak to him about parasport, and I think I know a little bit, I know nothing compared to what Richard Whitehead knows about. I've got very little passion compared to what the passion that Richard Whitehead Richard Whitehead has in parasport. He's an incredible human being. And we just need to get the awareness out there. And Rich is one of the people that is constantly out there. Johnny Peacock had a very powerful message when he finished his race in Paris. And he said to Seb Coe, he went, get us into the Diamond League. I mean, the Diamond League is one of the biggest athletics events that kind of happens kind of outside the major games. And he's absolutely right. Let's start getting in the Diamond League. Let's start getting, some of these athletes into the Diamond League. Because then your audience is massive. Rather than once every 4 years, and Channel 4 does an amazing job, rather than once every 4 years, we all see it on the games, and then as a test event at games, because there's a men's 100 and a women's 100. Yeah. Johnny Peacock is right. Let's start getting some of these events into the Diamond League and part of the Diamond League so that they're on par as far as, prize money is concerned, as far as the ability to get sponsorship. Because I tell you what, if that goes into the Diamond League and as part of that main games, sponsorship will go from whatever level it's at now and it'll go up a notch. Then you start getting the audience, kind of appreciation of having really talented athletes in big, massive sporting events.
And I think that's partially going to be the societal awareness and acceptance as well. So not just the athlete, but that's where all that comes in. I think we're definitely not there. There's still a lot to be done, but we've also come a very long way from where it started.
Oh, huge.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to a World Championships in, I won't say what country it was in. I went to a World Championships. And we got told when we went that the stadium was going to be full, that it sold out all the tickets. And no word of a lie, that we went there and the only people in the stadium were other athletes and coaches to watch the games. And it was a World Championships. There was nobody in the stadium other than, that's a lie, they brought in some school kids one day.
They do the same with para badminton to make it look like we have a crowd. They also get school. I mean, it does help because you get a little crowd.
Of course it does.
Like that is good effort on like the federation and all that. But I think it comes down to raising that awareness, going that one step above where you get actual spectators that want to come and see it.
Yeah, but look, but I think, and the world is controlled by money.
Yeah.
Right, and I think once we get the investment in, so that the really talented para athletes that we've got, and I don't care whether this is athletics or badminton or wherever it is, let's start getting the investment in, so we start getting parasport into these major events, that the audience starts, so then it just becomes part of the program, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Again, I'm going to use the word, but it normalises the program. It now just looks and go, well, I want people to go to an event and for them to say, why isn't there a para event at this sport? Yeah. I came along and I'm watching, for me, I'm watching athletics. I'd be stunned now if there wasn't any para events.
Yeah.
I think I said to you and I spoke to you the other day, I think there's some ownership on the governing bodies for each home nation as well. So, and I've been really vocal about it, and I said to you the other day when we chatted, I'd be going to all the clubs that compete in all these leagues, and there are lots of leagues that they athletics. I think YDL is the kids one, and it kind of goes through. Can you imagine if you said to every club, we're going to give you extra points for every para athlete that you put in, and some of these clubs want to get promoted to the next level.
Everyone's going to run for get para athletes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All of a sudden, and the people that are at the very top, the best athletics clubs in the country, if they start realising that they could lose some of that status simply because they are not having athletes compete for them, that would soon change as well.
Yeah.
So that's where the grassroots thing has to be really mindful around.
No one's born at an elite level. If you build it from the grassroots, and that's where you could see when it almost becomes parallel to the Olympics, because like the Olympics will be, someone started from a young age and has always been involved with sport.
In 2021, so this is just about Loughborough University, in 2021, I believe we had 4 para-athletes compete for us at Bucks. In 2025, if all our para-athletes turn out to compete for us, including you, no, but if you came and competed, we would have 14. So...
And this is just one university.
And this is just one university.
Yeah.
I was speaking to one of the ladies from Bucks, and she helped at the school games. And I've been asking for like 2 cycles with Bucks if we could invite athletes in to compete at Bucks to fill lanes up.
Yeah.
So that we get a good event to watch.
Yeah.
Because then the audience, I'm not sure the audience appreciates watching 2 people run against one another.
Yeah.
8 people run against one another, different spectacle.
Yeah.
And we've been struggling to get past, and to give, her name is Maddie Cannon, to give her a due. She's been wanting to do it. I think I said to you, Nick, I just got an email to say that in principle it's something that they're going to look at and do, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to be amazing. She went to school games, and all the para events were full. All the wheelchair racing was full.
Yeah.
All the seated throws was full. All the ambulance sprints were full. And she said, "Where's the gap between school games and these are school children that are I think the oldest is 16." So these are not far away from going to university or looking at the university they're going to go to. And yet you look at Bucks and there's 2 athletes in a race. So where's the gap?
Because it's only a 2-year gap.
It's between a 2-year gap.
Yeah.
So those athletes, they don't suddenly all go off and live in some country in the middle of nowhere and don't exist anymore. Yeah. They're still around. They're still athletes.
Where did they go?
They're probably still training at their clubs or wherever it is. They're just not competing. Now, some of them won't go to university. That's absolutely fine. But I guarantee you there's a large number of them that do go.
But they just don't have the opportunity.
But you just don't have the opportunity. Now, the great thing about Loughborough University is that para-athletes come in here.
They get the opportunity.
They get the opportunity to come and compete.
Yeah.
When we have the LIA, the Loughborough International, in May, we have para-athletics events at it.
Yeah.
Every time Emma Wiltshire, who's our programme manager, puts on an event, she's saying, what para-events do you want in? I've got para-athletes from Ireland, from France, asking me, if I come over, can I compete?
Of course you can, yeah.
Because there's no other events where they're going to compete at that feels like a major games.
Yeah, because it's only every 4 years, the Paralympics, so you want something else like that.
But the more that we can put on really good events where we weave in para sport and non-disabled sport together, the more it just becomes... So Emma will go, we've got races for XYZ para athletes, you need to make sure you get these filled. Right, so, but it's easy then because athletes want to come and compete.
Yeah.
Because you don't get many opportunities to compete at a big event. Yeah. LIA is a massive event. Bucks is a massive event for someone that's learning the trade to want to go and compete at major games. It's a well-organised event.
It's spectators.
It's massive because the stadium is full. I think there's 103 universities there.
Yeah, exactly. So there's bound to be spectators.
Yeah. So if you're a young athlete and you get invited to something like that, which is what I'm hopefully going to be able to do, and we can invite these young athletes along, it means that they can also, if their ambition is to go to university, potentially there's 103 universities they could go and talk to.
They see a place for them. Yeah. They know what their future is at.
And that university could be on the doorstep. Yeah.
No, I definitely agree with that, and I definitely see how far we've come, and like especially with Loughborough University and even around the world, there's been so much push to get para sport out there, and it's just been great to see. Great to see the level.
So the scary nations for me are going to be Colombia.
Really?
Are looking really strong. India.
Yeah, India's definitely.
I'm looking at India and I'm going. Oh.
India with the funding as well. They're able to fund a lot of athletes. They're doing. I think India, give it maybe even LA, they'll be dominating as well.
But they're going to be huge. And I just look at kind of some of the athletes coming out there, and I think, and like when South Africa and Africa kind of, I don't think they still have their act together yet with that. No. You know, when they do, it's just, you look and you go, oh my God.
Africa, I think when Africa comes in, Africa's going to hit.
Oh, it's scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's what makes you, so if you think about the population of China, and I'm going to go, I don't know, 1 billion?
I have no idea, probably something around then.
All right. And we're saying that 15% of the population is potentially got an impairment. So China have got more disabled people than the people live in the UK.
Yeah, and it took a long time for the Chinese people to accept the Paralympics and disabled people.
Yeah. So their opportunity, like I said, is just like India, Colombia,
the US, obviously.
The US, now that they've got the game, they're going to just blow this out of the park, mate. Yeah. And I think that's going to be part of the change as well. Yeah. Because they're such a big nation, if the acceptance is there,
you got a big proportion. And obviously the US dominates in media and all, like, they have influence all over the world. So once you get with the US, hopefully with LA, that goes along, which, you know, makes you feel hopeful for the future of.
So where's the next games after LA?
Australia.
Australia.
I think. Yeah, Brisbane, I think.
Now, Australia had a great history in parasport. Yeah. So my expectation is we'll see Australia do quite well, because I think we see that as a cycle, don't we? You've got major games, loads of investment goes in.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the games before your games,
you want to put the investment in.
So look at Paris now with the Americans. Yeah. You can see where the investment's going. You can see where the talent's coming from. Yeah. And they've got 4 years to nurture that. Yeah. Australia will come in, and New Zealand, because it's practically a home games for them.
Exactly, yeah.
Right? They'll start that investment knowing that that'll drive money. It's ran by money. Yeah. Exciting.
Yeah, on that note, let's do some para-athletics trivia.
Oh.
So, it's okay if you don't know these.
That's okay.
It's okay. The first thing I'm going to ask is, who is... By the way, I had to search this up, so I had, the answers could be wrong, but who is considered the fastest Paralympian on Earth, holding the record for the T44 100-meter sprint?
T44? Is that male?
It is a male, and I could give you one hint that could maybe narrow it down.
Go on.
You're Irish, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's Irish.
He wasn't a T44.
Oh.
He was a T13, and his name is Jason Smith.
Okay, that is right. But okay, so that's that. It is Jason Smith, but
do I get 2 points because I corrected the question? He was a T13 athlete.
Yeah.
I think he ran. Is it 10:28 or 10:32?
I actually don't know the time, but you know, I'll give you. This will make up for any other question you get wrong, because I'm gonna blame ChatGPT on this one. In which city were the first Paralympic Games held?
In which city?
Or country?
Was it in this? Did he not hold it? I mean, I don't know whether it was considered the Paralympic Games, but there was a Games held in this country down at Stoke Mandeville.
Oh yeah, so that was not the Paralympic Games, but that was the start of the movement. Yeah. The first official Paralympic Games were in Rome, Italy.
Oh, okay.
In 1960. All right.
Year I was born.
Yeah, so.
What month was it held?
I want to say summer, probably.
Yeah, I was born in the summer.
Oh, so you're basically as, I don't want to say old, but as old as the Paralympic. No, but I mean,
no,
you know, the same.
Yeah.
Which country has won the most Paralympic medals in like para-athletics in history?
So there's two answers, and rather than give two, I'm going to plumb for one, because my original thought was China, but then I'm thinking, because the USA are so dominant with stuff, so I'm going to go gut instinct to say no. I'm going to go my gut instinct. No, USA. I'm going to go USA.
That is the correct answer.
Is it?
Yeah, the US have the most Paralympic. We could fact check that at some point because
No, I agree with you. You're correct. I get the point.
Okay. Who is known as the blade jumper?
Oh, that's Marcus Rem.
Yeah, so Marcus Rem is a German, and he talked about him actually earlier because he said we could check that out later. But if he actually does go further than the non-disabled athletes, and then my last question for you: how many categories are there in para athletics in terms of like impairment types? How many impairment types are there?
Impairment types. Because some of the class does that? Are you separating field and track? Or just because there's a T and an F?
Yeah. I think no, we're not, because I think we're because it's similar impairment types. Isn't it?
Yeah. It's just whether you track or field.
Yeah. I think no, we're combining them. So like, it would be stuff like a visual impairment would be one classified as one.
I'm going to count it.
Okay. So he's counting on his hand. Oh wow.
Roughly. So I'm just counting the events.
Yeah.
Right. 24.
Okay, so see, Google said 10 impairment types, but I think they mean physical impairments, vision impairments, intellectual so it would be like those. But you know what, you said more, so we'll give you credit for that.
So Marcus Rem's world record is 862.
Yeah. Doing a quick Google search.
Long jump world record, 895.
Yeah. So
and that was Mike Powell in 1991. Yeah.
So basically now, he could be competing at the Olympics essentially.
He could probably win the Olympics.
Yeah.
With that.
Yeah, so that just goes to show how, once again, parallel it actually is para sport, or like Paralympics.
Well, I think it's ability, isn't it? Because they'll always say that the bladed athlete is got
an advantage.
An advantage because they're jumping off a blade, so it's not the same. But we're talking about the ability to just jump really far.
Exactly. Yeah. No. Yeah.
It's. The ability to run with Jason Smith, the ability to run. He held he's visually impaired, and he held the Irish record as well, I think.
Oh, like for non-disabled?
For non-disabled.
Yeah. Has nothing to do with it.
I've watched him run for years, and he retired either last year or the year before. And he's just, every game's, 100, 200, and even when it looked like he wasn't in the best shape, he still went. He's still an ultimate professional athlete.
Yeah.
Just incredible, as all the athletes are. And again, we say about, para-athletes and stuff, like I said, I don't consider myself. People do say, oh, Joe McDonnell's para group. And then
you're a coach.
They come and have a look at my group and they kind of go, oh, none of your athletes, there's a big group of your athletes that aren't impaired. You go, yeah, no. But you've got
you got integration.
But they all train together. And then I have had people say, well, which one of your athletes are impaired? Because they're all doing the same, and they kind of go, oh, you wouldn't know.
Yeah. But no, and I think, like you said, integration is important, and the future hopefully is looking bright for para-sport.
It's looking fantastic.
And that's what we like to hear. Joe, thank you so much for your time today, and sharing all the wisdom. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you around. And thank you to everyone for listening.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me along. I appreciate it.